Good Monday evening, everybody, and let's just dig right into Deuteronomy 19 through 21. Now, Deuteronomy is composed of Mosaic speeches by Moses to the Israelis before they enter the Promised Land. Yep, they finally made it. But Moses will not be entering the Promised Land because he had anger issues against God. He would die before the end of Deuteronomy. So I don't know who wrote the last section of Deuteronomy, probably Joshua. So they were to enter the Promised Land, and this section is all about laws and instructions specifically pertaining to justice, warfare, and community. This section is an expansion of the laws from Exodus and Leviticus, of course. Let's cover a couple of things that you're probably familiar with. An eye for an eye. That's right here in Deuteronomy 19, in case if you were wondering where it was. Yes, God definitely did call for an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Not to have pity on that, but to exact that exact punishment. Or, if they didn't pluck out an eye, then something of comparable value, I guess. But people look, they've heard the Gandhi quote, an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth leaves everybody toothless and blind. Ha ha ha. Very, very wise. But it was actually an act, an edict from the Lord to enact less stringent punishments. Because left to their own devices, the Israelis would seek vengeance, and maybe somebody had taken an eye of somebody and then they wanted to kill them. God is actually not recommending, but instilling a measured approach. So you have to remember again, these were barbaric times, and that you were dealing with the stiff-necked Israelis who they were problematic anyway. So, but in dealing with justice, they needed some guidance, and that's what it was. It's the same as like the slaves, where the Bible, Old Testament talks about the slaves. This is really an improvement on the treatment of slaves than what was commonplace at that time. So it's actually God being compassionate and merciful. Not to mention that in a lot of places, the slaves were like employees today. And, if you had somebody sitting in the next cubicle over from you and you just couldn't stand it. Anyway, that's besides the point. 2 witnesses. You couldn't have just, I saw you shoot that man in Reno just to watch him die. Well, if you weren't, admitting it and singing about it, I suppose that if you were, then you would be the second witness. Not to mention confessing to the crime yourself, but ordinarily you have to have 2 witnesses. Okay. Now, if you have a false witness, even if one of the 2 witnesses is false, and they're seeking a certain compensation for a crime, or sentence, or dismemberment, or plucking out of, or something like that, the false witness gets the sentence that he wanted to have applied to the one who he was accusing. Okay, that's all Deuteronomy 19. Deuteronomy 20 makes it very, very clear that the Lord, if we are of the Lord, and if the Lord is in us, or if we are the Lord's people, and we're being honchos, we're obeying the Lord and following His will, then God is in that battle with us, with us and alongside us and for us. It's not just the Israelites hundreds of years BC, but even in everyday life, there is God. You've heard the expression, something catastrophic would have happened, but God. It's because God is with us. And as a matter of fact, that's what Emmanuel means. When Jesus was born, and he was also fulfilling the prophecy of being named Emmanuel, it means God with us. God is with us. And he lays out Lord lays out certain guidelines to follow. One really got my attention. When you're going to war, if anyone is afraid, in other words, if you have a coward in your midst, they can go home. And it's better that you allow them to go home than that you should have them in your midst when you're fighting against the enemy and they weaken morale. But, these days, it would probably be looked upon as mutiny, treason, something like that, but the Lord was much more compassionate, much more understanding. And he says, you see, 20 is dealing with proper conduct to be in the Lord's favor during wartime. Kill all men as unrighteous. The unrighteous men, if they are allowed to continue their practices and live with you in the promised land, they are going to worship other gods. They are going to carry practices that are pagan, which are going to, which the Lord wants to stamp out. Women, children, pets, livestock, feather stock, whatever, are plundered. And don't cut down fruit trees because they are not your enemy. Very practical stuff. And really, really beautiful guidance from a loving Lord who understands how to measure out justice versus compassion and mercy. Which brings us to a couple of sections that I'm going to integrate for the first time. Things to meditate on, and the balance between justice versus mercy and compassion in your own life, in your own everyday life, is something to meditate on. For instance, consider times when you missed the mark on being fair and compassionate instead of seeking vengeance or justice. How could you have done better? How could you have done the Lord's will, as expressed in Deuteronomy 19 through 21? Trust and faith in God when engaging in spiritual warfare or with other adversaries. Be the strong one, stand in the light of the Lord, and follow his directions. Try not to just do your own thing, because that would probably be more violent, less compassionate, less merciful than what the Lord would have us do. And offering up a prayer, I'm not going to pray here with you. I'm going to ask you to come up with your own prayer, but basically on the theme of how to transform your heart. Ask the Lord to help transform your heart into a softer heart of flesh that will actually be more merciful and compassionate. And if you do that, and you become more so that person, then you'll be doing the Lord's will, as expressed in Deuteronomy 19 through 21. And I look forward to seeing you then. Until then, stay away from me. I don't want to, I'm just kidding. But I know that we have a loving community here in this church, and take these things to heart also in terms of promoting community responsibility and harmony in whatever group setting, including in our church. What more can you do? What more can you be in line with the Lord's will and his compassion and mercy? And that's what I've got for you. And